Welcome everyone to the Brand Fortress HQ podcast. Today, I'm your co-host, John Stojan. We have one of our other founders here from Brand Fortress HQ, Mike Kaufman, who's joining us on this episode. And then our guest who's speaking today is Eddie Wheeler. And Eddie is the owner of Guava Listings, has been doing a lot of things in the SEO space and listing optimization, running Guava as an agency to help brands with those types of issues from 6 all the way up to 8 figures. But today we're going to talk about something a little bit different that I'm really excited about, and that is geo ranking. So before we dive into geo ranking, Eddie, for folks that aren't familiar with you, can you give them a little bit of your background and kind of how you're involved in the Amazon space?
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me. Um, about 4 or 5 years ago now, I was teaching English in Vietnam, so I haven't lived in the U.S. for the last 6 years. I've been traveling all around. That's when I was first, about 4 or 5 years ago, I was first introduced to Amazon, launched my first product, failed, launched a second product, had some success with it. But through that journey, my main goal was to get away from teaching English. I realized that I had a really knack for copywriting, and now I knew all the basics of Amazon SEO. So I started offering my Amazon SEO copywriting services, and that went really well. And I started gaining a lot of clients, helping a lot of sellers. So the next logical step was to create my own agency, Guava Listings, which I've been operating now for the last few years. And yeah, just helping sellers, like you mentioned, with all things about their Amazon listings. So click-through rate optimization, conversion rate optimization, and of course SEO, and not just the foundational SEO, but also ongoing SEO, the long-term SEO tactics. And then recently, I discovered GeoRank, and my partner with this whole thing approached me and kind of tasked me with educating the Amazon world about Amazon GeoRank and how important it is, and of course how to track it, right? Because all of the major Amazon keyword trackers, they don't they only show one rank, when in reality, right, there's all different sorts of ranks throughout the country. So how to track it, and then of course, most importantly, how to influence it.
Yeah, so let's for people, because I feel like this is a topic that people probably aren't as familiar with. Can you give us an idea? Well, two things that I think are really important to double click on there. One is that a lot of the keyword tracking tools out there, Helium 10 and that type of stuff, they do a good job, but they're really looking at an average of across the market. So if you're selling in the US, they're looking at your keyword rank, across the US, whereas really Amazon, it's much more localized, where you might be, in position 3 in Arizona, and you might be in position 10 in Colorado or something like that, or a major metropolitan area. So I think that's important to know. Beyond that, for geo ranking, how would you explain it to the brands that are listening, and then also why is it important to understand this concept of geo ranking?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's like you said, right? It's so all these keyword trackers are showing an average or just one rank, right? So you might go on to Helium 10 and be tracking your product for its main keyword, let's say, and it shows number 2. Well, you could be ranked number 2 in Miami, but it could be that you're ranked 27 in Los Angeles, 100 in New York, and so now you're not getting any of those organic sales. So in your head, when you're just using one of the main keyword trackers, you might think that you're doing great, and you might think that you're maximizing organic sales for that keyword, but in reality, it could be different, and it's not just by state, right? It could actually vary within the state as well, in different localities in the state. So it could be really super granular. So um, essentially, like anything that you already know about, keyword ranking, It's still the same. It's just now applied to the specific localities. So, for example, right, if you've had a history of selling a lot of units in Miami, right, clicks, add to carts, all those things for a certain keyword, well, you're going to have a high organic keyword rank in Miami, but if for whatever reason in New York you haven't had that same history, you're not going to have that same organic keyword ranking. And so, on top of that, right, because Amazon sees for whatever reason that your product was popular in Miami, they're sending more inventory to Miami, making it quicker for the customer to get it. Right, it's quicker and cheaper for Amazon to send. So they're going to put more inventory, which also can influence it even further. So all this time, for whatever reason, it's just more popular in Miami. They're sending more and more inventory to Miami. That's helping raise the rank there. But in New York, you could be, really, you could be on page 2 or 3 even in some cases. So
And
Okay.
just to confirm and elaborate on that just a bit before we move on from it, is that so when I first read about this and started to research it, so I just opened, and anybody who's listening, I encourage you to do this. I opened an incognito window, and I just started searching Amazon and just changing my zip code in Amazon to see what my rankings were. And to be honest, I was blown away, by the differential. Like, I mean, just as Eddie is saying, I mean, there were zip codes for which we were ranked number two. And for the very same keyword, there were zip codes that we were ranked number 22, 42, 52. So it was a massive difference. And so, number one, I've confirmed that this is actually a thing. Also, what I was able to confirm, at least anecdotally for myself, Eddie, you were referring to what appears to be, I mean, you could probably describe it in a little bit of a flywheel sense, because if you've had sales in a particular location, then as you said, Amazon now believes, okay, that's an important region for you. So we're going to send inventory of your products there because people want it. Now that the inventory is there, then the shipping time comes down because it's coming from a more localized warehouse than someplace else. And then as that shipping time comes down, your rank goes up. You sell more. Amazon brings in more inventory because you're selling more. So there's a flywheel. And what I was going to say to that is, again, anecdotally, I was able to confirm that also in the sense that when I looked at those rankings, the the regions where we had poor ranking, we also had slower ship times. The delivery date was pushed out 1, 2, 3 days beyond the regions where we were ranked well, and all of the products that ranked above us in those situations had a faster ship time than we did. So it's not proof positive, but anecdotally, I would say my experience seems to prove this out.
Yeah, and I think that's important. Some great points as far as how much that your ship time influences your ranking. So for folks that are listening, that maybe you're like, okay, great. I understand that if I can ship something to a customer in a day or two, especially as Amazon really pushes towards this essentially 1 day delivery now. Um, but as a brand or a seller, I ship my product into Amazon, and then Amazon kind of does its own thing with the fulfillment centers. How can I influence my geo ranking in order to take advantage of that?
yeah, definitely. So really, right, it's twofold. Like first, like being able to track it, right, and understanding where you're actually ranking in all these areas at once, right? Because going in manually and changing all the zip codes, right? That's super tedious, and no one's really gonna be able to do that, and especially not at scale. So being able to track it, right? So my partner and I will be launching the first true GeoRank tracking app very soon. Still a few bugs that we're working on, or he's working on. I'm not the tech guy, but that should be out soon, and perhaps even by the time that this episode airs, that will be out. So you'll be able to track them, and then like truly be able to understand where you're weak, where your product is weak in terms of its main keywords, geo ranks. And once you understand that, then it just all becomes about marketing campaigns, right? You need to generate demand in those areas. So marketing campaigns that are geo-targeted. So unfortunately, of course, with Amazon sponsored ads, you can't geo-target at this time. Hoping that at some point or another, Amazon will add that option. But at this point, you can't do that. So you're really going to have to rely on sending kind of outside traffic and outside demand from those areas. So Facebook ads, Google ads, Amazon DSP, you can actually do geo-targeting. So that's definitely one option. So anything that you've done, and maybe you do have to learn Facebook or Google ads, or bring in an agency that can do Facebook or Google ads for you. But if you already know that, if you already have been using outside traffic, um, the same stuff is working. It just needs to be geo-targeted. So let's, for example, right, your week in New York. So you set up outside traffic, all these marketing campaigns, sending outside traffic to the listing, specifically in New York. And of course, you can do multiple localities at the same time. So it's just really all about generating demand in those specific zip codes that you want to work on.
So a couple of things in regards to that, Eddie. So as far as so you were talking about the app that's going to be coming out, and one of the things that it does, which again, you could manually do this, but it would be a very time consuming process. Now, I would say for some listeners, if you have particular areas or regions where you should have good sales, like, I mean, you know your customers, you know where they're located, certain products, like we sell pool tools, and we sell a very premium pool tool. So in essence, we can kind of gauge where we should have good sales, generally in the South and in those high income areas where if it's hot and you've got money, you have a pool. So, we can kind of suss that out a little bit. And so we could focus on specific zip codes. A lot of other products, that's not true. You could sell anywhere, so you can't really dial that back. So doing it at scale is tough. But the thing I was going to say was that if so, when you, what's the best way for me to say this? One thing that you can do in terms of this external traffic and kind of realizing is that, and I want to ask you this if this is true. So it has been said, and this makes sense, that external traffic coming into Amazon really doesn't pay attention to conversion rate of that external traffic, partly because then you could get targeted by some other competitors sending a bunch of low conversion rate traffic. So for geo ranking, have you found that also be the case? So like if I target a specific zip code, but I'm getting a really low conversion rate from my external traffic, does that matter in terms of sending that signal to Amazon so they'll start sending your inventory there?
Yeah, I'm not sure if we actually have like any data on whether the high or low conversion rate actually affects that at this point. Um, yeah, so I couldn't speak to that specifically because I just don't think we've my partner has done any of that like granular testing.
Okay.
But I do know, like, right, like, if it kind of goes back to what I help people with at Guava, right? You want to just always have that super highly optimized listing,
Sure.
emotional driving listing, so your conversion rate is always high. So that's when you are sending these outside traffic, that it shouldn't be something that you have to worry about too much. And of course, even if you get a add to cart and it doesn't wind up converting, right, that's still a signal to Amazon to
Right.
for ranking.
So I guess, one question that pops into my mind is, it's great that we have this kind of what you're talking about, and in order to be able to target specific different geographies based on, how you're ranking, and to be able to, like you said, boost, maybe instead of being on page 2, to boost that number up if it's, New York or Los Angeles, somewhere where it's a big market for you. But just to take a step back, you know, what processes do you recommend, or is there a good process for brands to identify, like, where are those best markets for them, where customers are already buying their product and they're going to get the best kind of bang for their buck for, boosting that geo rank?
Yeah, definitely. So, yeah, I think that the best strategy is, like, again, like, once you're able to track it with this app that's coming out, or however. Um, it would be best to focus on places that maybe you're not focusing on places that you're ranked 100 or your product is ranked 100, because that's going to take a lot of effort and time. Maybe you can come back to that at some point, but if you want to really get the most bang for your buck, look at places that you're ranked maybe on the bottom of page one already, right? So let's say that you identify, hey, in Houston and in Miami and in Tucson, Arizona, or whatever, uh, we're doing pretty good, but we're still not in that top 5 or that top 10 for most of these keywords. Let's focus on these first. Let's use the marketing budget for these first. Elevate those to the top 5, the top 10. Start getting the return on investment from that, and then okay, now we can focus on hey, in Los Angeles, we're ranked 30 to 40. Now we can start allocating marketing budget to try to boost that up, which is obviously going to take longer and probably going to take up more marketing budget.
Have you and or your partner been able to determine from any of the data that you're pulling and case studies that you're running, have you been able to determine whether, so in terms of this geo ranking phenomenon, let's say, obviously we know that one factor seems to be that if you have inventory that's close to that region, and so therefore you have short shipping times, that does seem to give you a boost in your rank. So that's thing one. But is there a secondary component, or is it just that these two things are related? That is, that Amazon, if let's say you're doing external traffic and you're geo-targeting that traffic. So let's say I blitz a bunch of ads to Miami. And so I get a bunch of add to carts. I get, quite a few sales that come through. Amazon now knows that, Miami is a place where people buy our products and that want our products. Is that enough for them to just know that Miami people want our product? Like, for instance, if we don't have inventory there, would Amazon still rank us even though our delivery times might not be quite as good as everybody else? Could we actually still get a boost just because Amazon knows those people want our product?
Yeah, and that is actually that's the primary driver. I think in actually some previous podcasts that I've done, I made it seem more like that inventory placement was the main thing, and that's not actually true, right? It is really like those first order or other order ranking impacts. So these add to carts, these buying sales, right? That is the primary driver, right? It's just like again, like just localized as opposed to like pre 2018, all of it was just kind of like across the board. But now, nowadays, again, right? It's all those same things still apply, but it's just localized. So once Amazon starts recognizing, right, that you're getting sales, you're getting add to carts in that area, you will see the rank start to rise up, and then the inventory placement is just kind of like that icing on the cake.
So then, as a follow-up to that, one thing that seems relevant here. So it seems like essentially what you're saying is, again, this would flywheel a little bit. So if you geo-target to a particular area, let's stick with Miami. Now you've given Amazon the signal that Miami people want your product. So your ranking starts to improve just simply from those signals. Nothing to do with inventory or ship times or anything. However, now Amazon is going to prioritize getting inventory to that area. And it does strike me that a portion of Amazon's algorithm does seem to relate to shipping time. And so therefore, once the inventory does show up there and your shipping times improve, that would simply, I don't know if I want to say exponentially improve, but it would be a multiplying factor in terms of your ranking in addition to the signals that you sent GeoRank wise. But that leads me to another question, which is regarding how much inventory should you be giving Amazon so that they can properly distribute it everywhere that you want to distribute it? Because a lot of people, of course, they try to keep their inventory narrow because they don't want to pay a lot in storage, and you can pay less storage in a staging warehouse or something. Would you be better off having more inventory at Amazon, paying a little bit more for your storage, but giving them more inventory to distribute?
Yeah, I believe so because obviously you don't want to go too crazy on it, but especially as you start to see, as you start to increase your weaker geo ranks, right? You're gonna be seeing more sales, and so yeah, setting some more inventory is probably a good idea because yeah, you just want to be able to like have those fast shipping times and all. Of course, like you're spending all this money on these marketing campaigns to send outside traffic. Paying a little bit more in storage fees, I think, is worth how many more organic sales that you'll be experiencing once you kind of have higher geo ranks across the country.
Yeah, and I think
Great.
we're seeing Amazon send us that signal. Recently they've added, the minimum inventory where I think that they're, kind of trying to nudge, well, not really nudge, they're pushing sellers in this direction, um, in order to make sure that there is enough inventory coverage in those areas where they're selling well, because they recognize that what impact it has on conversion. I'm curious from either one of you, any recommendations for sellers or brands that are listening and saying, okay, from a cash flow perspective, I understand keeping as limited inventory as possible, but if I'm looking at it from a trying to increase my sales and conversion based on the geo ranking conversation that we're having today, is there some guidelines that you would give on the number of days worth of inventory that you should have in stock at Amazon for a product?
You're on mute.
You muted, Mike.
Um, yeah, sorry about that. I've got dings and notifications going off over here, and I don't know if my mic's picking them up. Um, so what I was going to say was, and Eddie, feel free to critique me on this if you think maybe this is incorrect, and there's a little subjectivity here, but I will say that once we saw this trend in terms of the rank and our deliverability timeframes, we made a conscious decision. We haven't yet started geo targeting our ads yet. That is coming soon. But the first thing that we did, which was the easiest thing, was that we already had inventory here in the States in the staging warehouse. It was ready to go to Amazon. We were just waiting because normally we keep about 45 days of inventory at Amazon. We've been edging that up a little bit just because we've been having some troubles with delivery. But once we saw that, then basically my thought was, I already have inventory. Why don't I just give Amazon more inventory? Let's see how they distribute it. And let's see if it changes our delivery times and our ranks. And what I will say is, sending in more inventory did change things. Our sales volume went up. We did have some ranking changes, and there was some change in distribution. Now, again, this is all anecdotal. It's very early stages. I don't
Yeah,
want anybody to hang their hat on that and say this is a thing. But we raised our inventory at Amazon from like 45 days to like 75 days. We're actually going to increase that again just to see if we get even better distribution, if that changes things. But that's what we did. And so if that gives anybody any, at least helpful insight.
yeah, and like what I would add to that is like, I'm not like super advanced with like inventory management or anything like that, but what I would say, like, it is possible, right, to have high geo ranks across the entire country, right? That's like, it's not like something like, well, you're only doing well in Miami, and now you're going to focus on New York and LA, and that's going to make other geo ranks necessarily go down, right? You can, over time, pretty much have high geo ranks across the entire country, which definitely would require more inventory to help us
And
sustain that.
it's probably also valuable to point out that, like, you can know, for instance, let's say somebody were to get your application once it goes live, and it indicates, hey, you've got low rankings, in these cities, and maybe there's 50 of them, right? Um, you should be able to look at those, knowing your product, knowing your customer avatar, and hopefully that you should know who you're selling your product to, right? Specifically. But knowing those two pieces of information, you should be able to look at those cities where you're not ranking well and say, okay, look, some of these are very high population areas. Some of them are not very high population areas, and we know that our customers reside there. So let's focus on the high density population areas that we know our customers are there. Let's pinpoint that, as our starting point. We can always move out and target some of those smaller areas, but start with the high density places first. The other thing that I was going to say was, it strikes me that your service actually would be helpful in another way, because, correct me if I'm wrong, but the way I understand your service is that once somebody is using it, not only will it indicate for them where they're not ranking well, but it will also indicate for them where they do and don't have very much inventory.
Yeah.
So one valuable piece that I can see there is that if you're looking at a region where you have good inventory levels, but you're still not ranking well, then there's something else going on. Like, either you need to target, it would strike me that if Amazon has inventory there, they believe there's demand for your product in that area. And so maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's just because that's one of the default places that Amazon keeps inventory. But it just strikes me that it gives you more information, because you can start looking at, okay, is there some other factor? Or is it primarily that Amazon doesn't believe that's a high density area, of interest in our product, so we need to geo-target that? Or maybe there's some other factor going on.
Yeah, I mean, there definitely be some other factors. It might just be as simple as, like, this is one of their main distribution centers, so they have a lot there for whatever reason. So yeah, again, it's just, I mean, that could actually be a strategy. So, I mean, we're releasing this tool, and we don't know what every single application is going to be, right? People are going to think of different things like this. We're launching the tool. We're trying to educate people as much as we can on different ways to use it, but there's going to be probably 100 different ways that people will be able to use this data. So that might be something, right? It might be because there's already inventory there, and now you geo-target those locations, generate that demand, and now there's already inventory there. That, again, like inventory placement, it does have an effect, but not as much as an effect as these add to carts and units ordered in that area. But that could just, because there's already inventory there, right? You might be able to get higher up in the rankings even quicker because of just all the effects.
Yeah. Well, and I think a couple of things, and I mean, for people to be aware, because I know a lot of brands and sellers do this, where they'll have like a backup FBM SKU, which is better than nothing. But I think it's important, based on this conversation, just understanding how Amazon ranks in certain areas is that, yes, you can still sell your product, but your conversion rate is going to be a lot less than if you were selling through FBA and you had product nearby in that warehouse to be able to fulfill within that day or two that most Amazon customers are expecting.
Yeah, and if you are an FBM seller for whatever reason, you determine that that's the best way for your business to operate, you can use the GeoRank tracker and like affect GeoRank for maybe you just focus on areas that are closer to you or are closer to your warehouse, so that you can reduce shipping costs and shipping times yourself. So if your warehouse is in New York, maybe you just focus on the Northeast because you're going to be able to get it there quickly and cheaply.
Which is a really good point, because up until now, there was no effective way for you to evaluate, and most people didn't even know that they should. I certainly didn't, that you should be evaluating multiple zip codes within that region. So if you are an FBM seller, maybe you rank really well in New York City, but maybe Schenectady or Buffalo or something, maybe you don't have good rank, but you can get product to those people in a day or two. So you should dial in on those, because you can get good ship times there and good customer satisfaction out of that, but you don't have the rank. So yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I think that so we've got this idea of geo ranking, which is fantastic, Eddie, that you've really kind of walked us through. So what would you say, or is there anything else that we haven't covered about geo ranking that you think it's important for listeners to know?
Yeah, I mean, I think we covered, all the basics. I mean, there's all these applications, right? If you're like Mike and you're kind of, you have like a more seasonal product, right? Pools, you might want to use this to only to focus on the hotter areas, right? So there's so many ways that I think that, once you have the GeoRank data and you understand where you're ranking, there's so many different ways that it's going to be applied by people, that we don't even know yet. And yeah, but I do have a GeoRank newsletter. So as we launch this, as we start talking to people who are using it and different applications, and more case studies about it, like I will be sending out that information via that newsletter. So I do believe that the sign up link will be in the episode, but you could always go to guavalistings.com, where there's also a sign up link, and yeah, and that all the information will be on my website.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll make sure that that link is in the show notes. So I think really the first thing for anybody who's listening to this, if they're um, interested in geo ranking and how it can help move their business and their brand forward, is really to get on that newsletter and at least start tracking and understanding your geo rank, so that way you can make some decisions, because this is one of those areas that I feel like it's still blue ocean. There's a lot of things on Amazon that have gotten very competitive, ads in a lot of other areas, where you have a lot of brands out there, both in the United States and overseas brands, that are doing all the blocking and tackling and more on those subjects. And geo ranking is one of these um, couple of opportunities a year that I feel like that pop up that are kind of unique, and really blue ocean right now. So I think this is a great time for people that are interested in geo ranking, to learn more about it and at least start tracking that, so that way they can have some data to start making some decisions.
I think something that they should do too, honestly, anybody who's listening to this, like I would, it is not difficult to take and sit down for an hour and jump into incognito mode and just start searching Amazon in terms of these high population density zip codes and see how you rank. Because I can almost guarantee you don't rank as well as you think you do. And maybe you rank better than you think you do in certain zip codes, but you need to take a look at this, because honestly, if it's true, and I believe it is, I think once you do this search, you're going to find that it is. You're going to be seeking Eddie out, to get this software, because then it's going to give you a way to do this at scale that there's no way you could do, any other way. So, as an action point, I honestly believe everybody who's listening to this, if you're selling on Amazon, take an hour and just check your rankings. I guarantee you're going to find the very same thing that I did.
Well, here you go. That's perfect, Mike. That's a great takeaway for folks. Eddie, thank you so much for being on the podcast and walking us through geo ranking and giving some great action items. I'm really excited to see the newsletter and see this software as it comes out. Like you said, this data. There's going to be a lot of different ways in order to use this data, and I'm excited to see how brands and sellers can leverage this concept in order to move their brands forward.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. Thanks, Eddie.